This is Hot Seat with Violet Gonda, the program that puts the newsmakers in the spotlight and confronts the tough issues relating to Africa. So who's in the hot seat? Thandiwe Newton, a Primetime Emmy Award-winning actress, joins us today on the program Hot Seat with me, your host, Violet Gonda. The Hollywood star, who is currently the cover of the UK Vogue magazine, has enthralled us in many romantic movies and high-octane dramas, including Beloved, Good Deeds, Mission Impossible 2, and is currently starring in the HBO science fiction series Westworld. Thandiwe has also been using her social media platforms to champion human rights causes in Zimbabwe, and many welcome her powerful voice. Welcome, Thandiwe.
Oh, Violet, thank you, my love. It's so good to be here with you.
Oh, and it's good. It's very good to actually get this opportunity to talk to you. So thank you very much for this.
Pleasure and a privilege.
First, let's clear something. Where is Thandiwe from? As I understand, there have been two countries actually, Zambia and Zimbabwe, that have been feuding over this issue, with each claiming you. So where are your origins?
Well, let me explain. My mother is from Zimbabwe. She originally from Jombe. And my mother and father met in Lusaka. My father was a laboratory technician. My mother was a midwife, and they met, fell in love, and they were married there. And I was born on a trip back to London soon after they were married, and then they returned to Lusaka, where my sister and brother were born. My sister unfortunately didn't make it, but my brother. And then we continued to live in Zambia for a few years until Herbert Chitepo was assassinated, and he was a friend of my family's. And there was a lot of unrest, and they didn't want to leave, but they decided they would leave for a short while. And unfortunately, they never returned to Zambia. We settled in England after that.
So you identify as half, as a part British and a Zimbabwean.
Yeah. My father is British, and my mother, as I said, is from Zimbabwe, from Jombe, and she trained her nurse training was in England, although she didn't know my father on that trip back to England, on the trip to England where she trained to be a nurse, because she always intended to train in England and go back to Zimbabwe. And she did go back to Zimbabwe, but got a posting in Lusaka, where she went to work, and she met my father there. So she never intended to be in England, an English woman. But as I said, when unrest started to really turn into quite serious struggle in Zambia, my parents decided that it was time to spend just to let politics run its course, and unfortunately we never went back.
Yeah, I think I also saw a post, I don't know if it was on your Twitter page, where you said you're Samanika. Did I get that right, that you're from Manika land? Or...
Well, yes, my mother, yes, exactly. That's where my family originated.
Oh, so you're my home girl.
I feel like it already. It's amazing. And only this morning, when I met you this morning, your one of your colleagues is called Thandiwe, and her daughter is Thandiwe. So I feel very, very at home.
That's nice. That's very nice. Actually, she's my sister-in-law, and so that was my niece you saw.
Family.
Lovely, isn't it? That actually also brings me to the issue of identity and names. But I just need to go back a bit and just get a bit of background, because, you know, some Zimbabweans might not know much about, your work. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because, you know, those who do know have seen, you know, this amazing work, and I've said it in the introductions, or the blockbuster movies that you've starred in. And but also at the same time, those have come with challenges. So historically, what challenges have you faced as a woman of color in the film industry, and also with the media representation of women?
I've been an actress in film, which is its own peculiar and particular genre, for over 30 years now. And whatever difficulties and challenges there are, I've faced them. And intersectionality is a term coined by a dear friend of mine, Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a professor of law in America. And she coined the hashtag Say Her Name, which is something that's very important to me, looking at police violence against women of color in America. Anyway, but Kimberly coined the term intersectionality. And in a way, it was such a relief that an academic had really pinpointed the challenges faced, particularly by women of color, because we're dealing with misogyny, or sexism, and as a woman of color, you're also dealing with potential racism. And yes, all of those things I suffered. I would say that mainly was ignorance, and I was very aware of that from the beginning, which is why, thankfully, I didn't internalize shame around the color of my skin. I did not. If I realized that someone was treating me in a disrespectful way, and it was to do with the color of my skin, I would immediately disregard that person, because I felt that they were my subordinate in terms of just their mental capacity. Because race, if you just consider it for any degree of time, is a complete fabrication, which is a hangover from colonialism as a way of making the colonists and the colonized as different to each other as possible, so that it could justify brutal behavior and a kind of master, servant mentality. And we're not in that we're no longer masters and servants in this world, right? But so why are we still using why are we still using these terms, which were only relevant at a time when you had masters and servants? And the only way, of course, the reason why it's still there is because it benefits people who often don't show themselves. But and what I mean is powerful people for whom it's valuable for them to have most citizens fighting with each other, so that they're not concentrating on what's happening in the higher echelons of society, where deals are being done and pieces are being moved around that board, which we have no idea. We're too busy hating on each other because of this fabrication that is called race. Yeah. So I came from that place of not seeing really race. And I think it's mainly my mother, who is Zimbabwean. She found herself in an isolated part of England, Cornwall, way down the bottom of the country. There were no people of color except her and her offspring. It was a very, very challenging time for her. She was hyper aware of the racism that was being, ignorance, as I said, but ignorance unchecked can obviously turn into racism. And racism is where it gets really dangerous, because if you call it racism, and race, the whole term race is a an illusion, it means there's no way of checking really whether it's valid or not. If you call it what it is, which are ignorance or hate crimes, then you know where you are and you know how to deal with it. Race as an illusion means that it's even an illusion that we manage to heal or do anything about it. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's not real. I just think that change is going to come from underneath. It's going to come from the countries. It's going to come from Zimbabwe itself. It's not going to come from trying to project or send in troops or look what's going on around the world. You send in troops from another country, that doesn't create trust within the host community.
I will ask you a bit about your thoughts on Zimbabwe, but going back to this whole issue of the challenges that you faced in the past. In the critically acclaimed series Westworld, you play a robot that regains its memories of its past life. Did your role influence any of your decisions to reclaim your identity?
Yeah, because at the point, funnily enough, just before Westworld, I had managed to extricate myself from a project which I was so heartbroken over because of its sexism and casual racism. And I had talked to the producer about it. I had tried to make changes within, but when I realized that none of that was going to happen, I managed to remove myself from a long-term contract, which it really does take a lot of courage. And I was frightened, but I managed to do that because of those things. And then I wasn't planning on working. I had a new baby. I have 3 children now. I wanted to write. I realized there were things that I wanted to actually frame myself. I was frustrated by always saying other people's words. Sometimes that would be okay and it would align with my own ideas about things, but more often it wouldn't. So it was always frustrating, and that's what I decided to do. And then Westworld came along, and I was just so surprised by how radical it was. To literally take themes of misogyny and violence and, ethnic hatred and subvert them so that we can actually comment on why humanity does that. And the way we do it is by using hosts, robots, as metaphors for the dispossessed in the world. So I played this robot, and it was one of the most cathartic experiences of my life. I felt like, as an activist, a political rights activist for human rights, every day when I was working on that show, I was working. I was an activist, because through the story of Maeve in Westworld, where she starts to break down and she starts to remember a past which has been denied her. Now, at this point in my life, as a woman who is both from Zimbabwe and from the UK through my parents, as an actress of color, I've realized that I've been lied to again and again and again about who I am, about my authority in the world, my power. And I've been lied to by the stories that we're told. I've been lied to by the own stories that I've participated in telling, But when I was working on Westworld for the first time, because this character, through the information that she remembers about her own life, she realizes who she is. And then in an effort to gain her freedom, she knows that she needs to discover the truth of everything. And that's really it. Once you know the truth, how you're going to deal with the situation is up to you. It's once you're liberated by truth, you might not even want to retaliate. I mean, that's the thing that I found so stunning in the work I've done across the world. When I'm in the field with people who've suffered the most horrific human rights, all they want is peace. They don't want anyone to be killed in response. I mean, by and large, that is. They just want peace and for it not to happen to anyone else, right? They want to move on. So that's how I felt, you know, with Westworld. I felt like I was every day engaged in the pursuit of trying to free the oppressed, you know, and the robots in the show are a metaphor, as I said, for the oppressed. And from then on, I realized I'm not an actress for hire anymore. You know, I do things because I really want to, because it gives me the sense of purpose in my life that I would have even if I wasn't hired, right? And also it's really freed me up with a sense of paying it forward. You know, I have a very different attitude to what I even do with my earnings for things. I you know, I call it generosity if you like, but everything that I am comes from these powerful women in Zimbabwe, powerful women, my ancestors from Congo. I did my DNA test and it turns out before Zimbabwe, my family was in Congo, which makes a lot of sense because I do a lot of work in Congo. And that's who I honor. So actually my life is now really about trying to discover truth and share tools, psychological tools, and also tools for dealing with breaking down the system that disenfranchises so many people. And what I get from that, what benefits me, I make sure that I am uplifting those in the part of the world that have literally given me life.
From Thandi to Thandiwe. Was that just a clerical error or a race thing to confirm with society?
Yeah, because I'm not changing my name, I'm restoring it, you know. And it's a story I now come to know because so many people have shared their stories with me as a result of this Vogue article, of being erased, of your culture being erased when you enter a new host environment. You know, I've heard about people who arrived from China and they were given names. I've met people who don't even know what their name is because of their westernized name. And you may, of course, they've all made their names their own. But if you think about how effective a tool that is for erasing the culture where you come from, to even take your name away. And for me, it happened just very easily and simply. You know, I was very shy about my name when I was a child because it was so different to everyone else's. People called me Tandy, not Thandiwe, because Thandiwe was such a mouthful, and also because Tandy people pronounced wrongly. They'd say Thandi all the time, or they just say it wrong, and it was just so punishing for me. I felt talk about being an outsider anyway, and so it was almost like a compromise that people would call me Tandy. And then as I got older and more confident, I would secretly Thandiwe, just the romantic. It's such a beautiful name. It means beloved. It speaks to me about my mother's family and, you know, Shona, and even though it's not a Shona word, it's actually from Zulu, the name, which was also so incredibly romantic and gorgeous. And it kept me attached to my history. So, you know, I was still Thandiwe to a few. And then I remember when I made my first movie, I was 16 years old. It was in Australia. It was a complete fluke. I wasn't planning to be an actress at all. I was a dancer and, you know, studying hard to just be accepted into life. I did this movie in Australia, and the director had named the character a Hebrew name, even though it was an African. I realize now in retrospect that he knew so little about modern Africa. It's almost pathetic. But he knew I was called Thandiwe, and he was so like, oh God, what a beautiful name. And it's also authentic. So in order to make his character and his writing more authentic, he took my name and he called the character Thandiwe. And I was so flattered that anybody would even, not only was he, it was the opposite if you to what I dealt with normally, where people were like, what, how do you say it? What name's that? You know, horrible crap. He was like, oh, what's that? Because he was appropriating. That's cultural appropriation. But I was just so jazzed that it wasn't something that was going to be a problem. So he used my name. But then in the credits to the movie, they used the name that everyone called me, which was Tandy, just, you know, which was easy. So that stuck forevermore. My name was no longer Thandiwe, it was Tandy. And it was, you know, you don't get to be in a movie that often, do you? So obviously, like, oh, suddenly my whole identity was wrapped around this incredible thing. I'm in a movie, because I didn't think I'd ever be in another movie. It was a total fluke. Anyway, it stuck. Yeah. And so only now as an adult, and I don't, you know, for years and years, I was worried that if I reverted to Thandiwe, I would lose all my fans who only know me as Tandy. But now as a grown woman, and I'm sure that you might, Violet, understand what I mean, where you get to an age where I don't need to have this fame around me. People are going to find my work. It's not about me. It's about the things that I'm trying to give out. People can't possibly know me. You know, if I'm on a screen. It's the work that I'm offering, you know, and then I get to have my name back. And that's what I feel so great about. Because if I'm called Thandiwe in my movies, I'm going to be called Thandiwe in my life. And that's all I really want, is to be called Thandiwe in my life.
And you know, in recent months, you have become very vocal about the human rights situation in Zimbabwe. What triggered this?
What triggered it? The violence. The violence triggered it. I've known about the violence surrounding political issues for a long time. I'll tell you what it was. It's partly to do with the pandemic. The fact that people were being forced to wear masks, and it felt to me that it was a cover for more. It wasn't the whole story, you know. Using the pandemic as a way of you know, controlling people. And when I first went to Cambridge all those years ago, I had a reading list, and the top of the reading list for an anthropology student was Tsitsi Dangaremga's Nervous Conditions. I read that book 30 years ago. Changed my life. It connected me to Zimbabwe in a new way, because it was a modern telling of modern women, modern family, you know. And then, so when I saw that Tsitsi had been arrested when she was on a peaceful demonstration and put into prison, what's happening? And that's when I couldn't turn away. I wanted to help Tsitsi first. That's what began. Her voice, look, a writer's voice, that people who comment on society, whether it's journalists, whether it's anthropologists, whether it's, you know, all of us can, of course, but people whose role is to create safe places by speaking the truth about where they're from, you know, we have to protect. And I obviously felt a real kinship too. And then Hopewell Chinono. And then the three girls, Joanna Mamombe, who were abducted and who were found weeks later dumped on the side of a road, who had experienced concussions and weren't able to, had very hazy memories of what had happened, were traumatized. And to see pictures, and then to be told that these pictures weren't real, and to be told that what they were saying wasn't truthful. And I've worked for 20 years in the field as a human rights activist, focusing on women and girls. And we believe women. We start there. We start from that place. Why would someone talk about something as shameful as being abducted and sexually abused? Who wants that as an identity? I'll tell you what, no, you don't. I was sexually abused. It's really hard to talk about it. The only reason I talked about it is because I didn't want it to happen to other people. It was a sacrifice on my part, because you become it's like you're stained, right?
Mm.
You're an example of the bad things that can happen. So keep the bad things away. So I would even be, you know, dismissed by people, other women, other actresses in my field. So you believe women, that's where we start. And I was just, so my compassion and the horror. And I'm a human rights activist. Why should I stop being a human rights activist when I look at Zimbabwe? And I feel, you know, when I do talk about, when I'm engaged in work in Zimbabwe, it's with organizations that do amazing work on the ground, but I never make a big show of it. I don't let people know that I'm doing it because I don't want it to seem political.
That's what I was actually going to ask. That
and I know everything is political. I know people say everything's political, but it actually, if we're really, it isn't about politics for me. Mm-hmm. This is about a lot of young people being abused by a system in place, or being abused and we don't even know who's doing it. I just want to know who's doing this, and can they have to stop, because here's the thing, whoever is doing that, whoever abducted and dumped these women 2 weeks later on the side of the road, if that isn't the government, then surely the government wants to know who's doing it so that they can do something about it, so that people can feel fair. That's all I as someone from another country looking on, I mean, I'm asking, I guess I'm asking everybody, including the government, if anyone has any information about how these things are happening. Because if it isn't the government, they'll sort it out, right? Because that's what
that's exactly what I wanted to ask you. That it's good that a celebrity of your stature is involved. But then the next question is, then what? Are you just raising the issues, generally advocating, or beyond highlighting the issues, what in your view needs to be done?
Well, I'm one person, and although I recognize that one person can do so much, it's not just Twittering. You know, I speak to those 3 women's lawyers. I find out how I can help. I have also been looking at other non-profits, organizations that have been springing up through Zimbabwe, trying to deal with the problems there, like the in Chitungwiza, a soup kitchen, which I interviewed Samantha, the woman who runs it, who started it a year ago. She had a handful of people, friends of hers, that would come over, and now she feeds up to 3,000 people a day. I started off donating, and then I suddenly realized, it was actually my mother said, oh, we must tell people in, different parts of Zimbabwe, we must let everybody know, because it's just incredible that this is possible. And I thought, well, my goodness, I should use my social platform to just spread the word. And not just for people who maybe want to kindly donate, but just to be aware. Yeah. Look what's going on. Look at this incredible woman. Look what one person can do, and maybe it will inspire another person to help with something else. Of course, it would be great if the government can do everything, but that's obviously not the situation. So it's not just me talking, tweeting about human rights. It's also me, or about the terrible things that have been happening. It's also me looking at the wonderful things that are happening, the incredible efforts that people are going to great lengths to perform, and highlighting their work and celebrating them and empowering them. And, this is, I want to stay in joy, Violet. I want to stay in a state of positivity, because here's one thing: when you have been oppressed, one of the worst things that happens is you internalize that and you become your own worst enemy. You start to give up. And there's one thing I've noticed about Zimbabweans: they don't give up. My family there, we always hearing about issues and electricity being turned off and no petrol and not even able to use the Zimbabwean dollar anymore. Where can I get, look, the diaspora in the world. I'm talking to you now, diaspora. You know what my mum's been doing for the last 30 years, what I do. Sending those, if you know anyone going to Zim, you give them a suitcase full of stuff. Take it to give to family and friends. Do you know that the diaspora pays 20 billion annually into Zimbabwe? We matter. We matter. And what I get from my fellow Zimbabweans is this spirit of survival in me. That is where it comes from. Because believe me, Violet, I've asked myself that again and again, because I don't know why I managed to rise out of situations the way I do. Honestly, I don't. And it is the Zimbabwean.
We are an incredibly resilient people.
It is the Zimbabwean in me. It's in my mother. I see it every day in her. It is the Zimbabwean in me. And now I know that, I feel like, okay, I'm good. I'm good. Do whatever happens, I'm good. And from this position, I'm never going to stop, you know. And it's about it's not just focusing on these horrifying, mysterious crimes. It's also recognizing that people are managing to survive in very difficult environments. They're not waiting to be told what to do, you know.
Yeah.
They're not waiting for handouts, you know, and they're the people I want to help, you know, and I'm doing a lot more. And I'm also, you know, I'm very well connected, I guess, you know, out here. I've been doing a lot of work for years. I'm on the board of an incredible organization called VDay, which has been working in Zimbabwe for years and years, as well as all over the world. So these tentacles go far. So yeah, I am one person, but it's not just about tweeting. It's about being involved, staying aware. That's the other thing, which is why social media is amazing, because it means you can stay aware. There's really no excuse anymore, is there, about being ignorant?
and Thandiwe, has Hollywood actually noticed, because Zimbabweans are noticing, you know, as you can see from the comments and the responses that you get online. But I'm just wondering, when you talk about Zimbabwe to your Hollywood friends, what is their knowledge, understanding? Is it an issue that can gain traction? What do your colleagues in the industry say? Support you?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I don't live in America. I'm here now because I'm shooting Westworld, and it is a home from home in many ways. But I am a British person, so it's more about my British family. You know, Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood. I don't engage with Hollywood over Zimbabwe. No, I mean, I engage with Hollywood over the way women of color are treated. And I guess in some ways that is engaging Hollywood with Zimbabwe, because, you know, women of color are everywhere. But specifically about Zimbabwe, no, it's something that's way bigger than Hollywood for me. You know, people in Hollywood, are they going to be able to have, I mean, I guess, you know, celebrity is a big pull, but I think, you know, one thing I'm aware of is that people are scared to, this is what people are frightened of. People are frightened of losing their popularity. That's what it is. I have been so unpopular for speaking out against sexual violence, both in the industry, and I've been unpopular for that. So I'm glad to be unpopular, because now turns out you're popular for talking out about. Do you see what I mean? In the space of 20 years, I've gone from being unpopular to, so for me, it doesn't matter. Popularity is bullshit, you know? It's particularly, it's like, what are you popular for, right? So, but Hollywood is a place where it's all about popularity. So is it gonna make you popular to speak out? I mean, and I think because I tried to engage Hollywood for a long time about sexual violence, and it fell on deaf ears for a long time, which I don't judge. I get it. Zimbabwe's, I mean, it's interesting actually. There's another actress who recently she restored her name too and was very excited. Tanya Fear is the name she goes by, her stage name. But I don't know many Zimbabweans. I mean, I know Denai a little bit. Denai Guerrera, amazing actress and force. I saw her play Oh my goodness, Violet. Did you see her play, love?
Yes.
Wasn't it amazing? Exceptional. And with Letitia Wright. Oh my goodness. It was dealing with colonialism and how it affected the spirit of indigenous African, well, in the case of the play, this young woman. It was stunning. And I look at Chinayi and I think, well, that's you know, I think there is a way of influencing through your work, right? I don't know. I mean, I haven't spoken to Chinayi about Zimbabwe, but we don't know each other. We're not friends per se. We've seen each other at events and things. But I don't think that. I don't know whether she would be open to it, talking about it, about Zimbabwe. But she's doing it with her work. So I appreciate that, you know, I do. And I think that it's very powerful. It's very powerful. But I would like to gather more members of the diaspora together so that we can encourage peace and encourage the truth to be revealed. It's very difficult when you're obviously not on the ground, you're not in the country. But I like I said to you, I speak to fellows, I speak to Zimbabweans regularly now, you know, on the ground, and I'm aware of what's going on, as like I said, on a human rights level, and trying to connect people to services that will help. You know, that's what I'm doing right now, honestly, is more short term, but with a view to long term.
Maybe Westworld should go to Zimbabwe. What do you think about that? Perhaps that is something that can go in a script somewhere to highlight the situation in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't think so. Westworld's never got into any real specifics of what's happening, like literally now. But I've loved how it's kind of it's predicted things, and there's definitely satire and commentary. Like I said, you know, the hosts for me are metaphors. And I must say, you know, we've been to Shogun World, we've been to War World. I mean, obviously, these different worlds that are created in the show, they're theme parks, okay? So I dread to think what Africa World would look like, okay? Like, because it would be the kind of, I hate to say it, but would it be the kind of like Disney Lion King version of Africa? Like, we don't need that. I mean, of course, you know, so I have thought to myself, how can we bring Africa more into Westworld? How? You know, I wish we could. I wish the same treatment, like, I have fantasies about that. Like what? Because I'm so desperate. Like look, things are changing so much. So much. When I first started out, people of color on screen, it was, you know, I don't have to say, you know, there was a drought of good material for people, drought of scripts, roles, my goodness. And now it's amazing. It's incredible. I can't keep up with all the incredible actors. I could name all the bloody black actors when I started out, practically, you know, of the sort of the mainstream. It's incredible. And it's extraordinary, this explosion of talent and desire for the stories of African Americans, right? And I want to see that from Africa. Filmmakers, and we have them. They're there. Tsitsi Dangarenga's made movies. You know, of course those films are coming. They're coming. In fact, you know, documentaries, it's tough though. It's not easy to make a movie in Zimbabwe. I'm a friend of Camilla Nielsen, who's a documentary maker, and she made Democrats a while ago. And she has a new documentary coming out called President. which was made around the last election. And she was there on the ground. The material she got, Violet, was extraordinary. So that's the kind of, like, she's a filmmaker. She's from Denmark. She's amazing. And she just would not stop. She would not be curtailed from the journey. And she followed them. You know, Nelson Chamisa gave her he gave her full access. If that's someone who's got no skeletons in the cupboard, I don't know what. You know what I'm saying? Like, full access. Right there, you're like, oh, okay, he's got nothing to hide. That was great. And you follow this story, and that's going to come out soon. It's going to come out soon. And it's powerful. So
it is powerful. I know Camilla, and I actually have a little role in that film, a little slight role, but I still have to see it. I can't wait to see.
Oh, tell me, were you interviewing?
No, I think she used one of the press conferences, because I was in Zimbabwe during that period in 2018, and she was there at the same time covering the elections. So one of the shots used in the press conference when I was asking the president a question, I can't remember what the kids. That was you.
No. That's no small thing. That's no small thing, baby. That was you asked the question. No, you did. You asked the question. Thank you. Thank you. My goodness. Yay.
Well, that actually brings me to, thank you very much for that. That actually brings me, to the question about politics. Some are labeled anti-government if they criticize the system and are automatically labeled opposition. So are you aligned to any political party? Do you support any political party in Zimbabwe?
I do not, because I don't feel that if I was going to support a party, I would do due diligence, but I would also want to be in the environment. I would want to have a stronger sense of what is needed around, and I'm not a Zimbabwean. I'm not a Zimbabwean. I can't speak to that. I just can't. But I saw the documentary, and I'm aware of the players in the documentary, and I was really, because I wasn't so sure about Nelson Chamisa years ago. I was just concerned. I was worried that Thandiwe's first seemed to be a woman. I thought, and then suddenly she wasn't being, after he tragically died, it was Nelson that became, his. And I just thought, why not? Why not a woman? Is this sexism? What's happening? But I watched the documentary, and I'm just so grateful for the information inside it, because it really taught me. I mean, it certainly, I felt grateful that even though only 40 years old, he has the might, and he's dedicated, and he's alive emotionally. And that was it was heartening. There were no interviews with Mr. Mnangagwa, so I wasn't able to say the same thing, with him. I haven't seen that kind of in-depth, maybe if we did see that, we would all, I could be like, oh, he's cool. But, so I don't support a political party. I'm not a member of the diaspora that could vote, because I'm a British citizen, but my goodness, there is a potential for the diaspora of Zimbabwe to vote. How cool would that be? And it can happen, and it must happen.
What are your thoughts about Nelson Chamisa?
Wrong. I mean, the complexities, the lack of infrastructure. How do you get to the people in the rural areas? There are so many obstacles that seem to be erected. I mean, I think the documentary answers a lot of those questions, and I don't really want to speak to it because it's going to come out, and I would encourage people to watch it and experience it. And as I said to you before, my reservations about Nelson Chamisa were really challenged when I watched the documentary. So I think that really answers your question. You know, I think, but at the moment, it's so hard to really. I don't think we're ever going to go back to normal. That's a reality, right? So in a way now, he has to innovate. He has to keep growing and changing to meet the demands. He is going, of course. And I very much hope that he will, because in a democracy, it's important to have opposition. It is. Let's hope that he provides good opposition. People of Zimbabwe deserve it. You know, and I hope that he gets good opposition too in the government, because people of Zimbabwe deserve that too. They deserve a fair election, a free and fair election.
You know, as you say, some of the challenges also have to do with fatigue. Because it would appear that the crisis in Zimbabwe has been going on for a very long time.
One of the
far back as independence in 1980. You know, a lot of things have happened.
2008, I mean, my goodness. You know, 2008 was I think people are still recovering from what happened in that election. You know, it's just so much. I think there's so much effort in recovery that, yes, how do you then generate newness? But,
so what did you think? So what did you think when Mugabe was overthrown in a coup in 2017?
I was very surprised. I was absolutely astonished, actually. I was astonished, and that it could have come from inside too. You know, that it was that Mnangagwa. You know, it's just so confusing, and I think people were preparing more for a future after Mugabe, right? Not for a continuation of anything similar. Yeah, it's such a. I've yet to see it being. I've yet to see evidence of it being what Zimbabwe needed. That change. I mean, there's been a lot. There was a lot of talk about, you know, democracy and freedom and empowering Zimbabwe for Zimbabweans. There were a lot of those promises, and it's just waiting to see them materialize. But yeah, it was so shocking.
What about the role of the international community? What can you say about how it's handled the Zim situation? And also, do you think America, for example, is doing good for the people of Zimbabwe via its so-called targeted sanctions? Because it's divided the society in Zimbabwe.
No, I'm sure it has. I'm sure it has, because, you know, we're also talking about how Zimbabwe, like the rest of Africa, has been treated by the rest of the world. Let's face it, you know. And I think one of the reasons, you know, Mugabe, he gained independence for Zimbabwe. It's a huge, and that comes at a price. And it feels like in terms of big scale thinking, everything that's happening now is almost sort of shifting it away from this fight with colonialism, and it's now looking more internally, you know, Zimbabwe internally, and that's a whole new frontier. So I can imagine that the distrust of the international community is high, you know, and why now? Why this, right? Why not before when things were difficult? You know, there's so many, and similarly, you know, I remember talking to Desmond Tutu about what people have to understand too is the regard for the older generations in Zimbabwe and Africa throughout is something that has been lost in a lot of the world. The respect for the elders. You know what I'm saying, Violet? You do not disrespect your elders in Zimbabwe. Am I wrong in saying that? That's a tradition. It's deep rooted, and it's one of the reasons why it's particularly difficult in a political situation, because if your leader is also a man, an older man, you don't disrespect your elders, and it's almost like even history is now being smashed up and thrown on the fire of revolution, right? Because you can't hold on to what used to happen, because that used to happen out of respect for your elders, right? And we're even now, you know, maybe that's even being threatened. Look how many youth, you know, that boy dumped out. Who dumped that boy outside his home, naked, dead, covered in a Hello Kitty blanket that we all saw, right? These young people, they don't want to disrespect their elders, not at all. I just remember Desmond Tutu saying that, and it made me understand Mugabe in a whole different way. You know, this titan, someone who brought independence, you know, but I feel like we're hanging on to an old kind of triumph, and it's not helping people anymore.
You know, it actually brings me to, it reminded me, and perhaps on a lighter note, I saw one of your interviews where you talked about how your daughter, Ripley, once confronted British Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
Well, he wasn't Prime Minister then, but I think
he wasn't Prime Minister then. Okay.
No, listen, my daughter she's a straight shooter. She would have said it if he was Prime Minister. But the reason that she was so impassioned is because Brexit had just been announced. This is 5 years ago, and it had just been announced. And Boris Johnson was and Nigel Farage were the key architects of Brexit. And he was sitting in the theatre, and so was Ripley Parker. That's my daughter. And you know, Brexit was a devastating experience, and when that was passed, it was truly a very, very bleak day for a lot of people in England. And so that's what compelled my daughter to call him a word that he understood to be pretty bad.
But
sorry.
Can you imagine Ripley saying that to an African leader like Mnangagwa, you know, facing up to our politicians?
Well, I don't know, because in order to, would she, if she had been if she was a 20-year-old young woman raised in Zimbabwe, would she? And that's what I mean. You can't be a British person imposing my ideas of things onto a Zimbabwean, right? I can't, as a British person, advise or anything. All I can do is respond to what I'm aware of. So no, Ripley would not be entitled to do that, because she is not speaking from the heart of the country where that comment would matter. But no, she's a British girl, so to the British future Prime Minister, yes, she did a good job. But I'd like to think that maybe someone like Ripley would have the courage to speak her truth to anybody. But what I do know is that as a fellow Zimbabwean, I'm not a Zimbabwean citizen, but all my childhood, when I did get bullied or dismissed, passed over, the thing that always kept me proud was that I knew that these idiots that were being mean to me didn't know where I really came from. And I used to think about that. I used to think about the stories my mum told me, my family in Zimbabwe, my grandfather, how we were part of a royal lineage, and it gave me pride and a kind of force field around me. And that is what I'm responding to now, is the Zimbabwe that I know. Maybe it's romantic. It is a little. That has inspired me so much and has been the secret safe haven for my soul when I was dealing with crap as a Black British girl and then a Black girl in the industry and so on. So people who hurt fellow Zimbabweans aren't Zimbabweans to me, you know?
How do you deal with online harassment? You know, as some trolls have been really scathing, you know, with their attacks.
I haven't read any of them. I have a thing on I'm not very techie. So I have a thing where I don't see responses unless they follow me and I follow them, I think. So it's a kind of, it's a community that I've already, so if I don't follow you, I'm not going to read. And I've seen some things from people that I even follow that like, whoa, what are you doing? Or something. And I accept it. I utterly accept it. Everyone has a right to an opinion, as do I. So I accept your opinion because I would very much like you to disagree, but I'm allowed to speak it. And then that's how we have a dialogue. It doesn't end there. I think there's this idea that it just ends there. It doesn't. It could end there maybe on social media because the other person, you don't let them speak back to you like I basically do. But so it's sort of frustrating, isn't it? Because it means you don't have a dialogue necessarily. But how do I deal with it? Well, I guess that's the one way is I don't engage, or I don't always engage with it. Sometimes I do. I want to learn too, Violet. I want to learn too. You know, maybe we'll discover that a lot of the police who have been carrying out these awful, awful, inhuman acts, bullying, and I saw a girl being hit around the face because she wasn't wearing a mask, right? And this is just stuff that gets recorded on people's phones. It makes me upset now, right? Maybe we'll discover that there is, that there are just some people who are doing stuff they shouldn't really be doing it, and they get picked out, and the ones that were drunk at the, at the event that I saw, on my feed, maybe those people are going to be given some help for their alcoholism. Look, and I'm speaking, what I'm saying, I don't, would that happen? I doubt it very much, but it doesn't stop me hoping. And we have to have ideas about what is right and what we can do before we actually then try and get there. These are my ideas. I guess this is, please, no more violence. That's it. Please. No, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
Do you see yourself going to Zimbabwe and perhaps just helping directly from there someday? And also, when was the last time you were there? I can't remember at the beginning. Did you say you've been to Zimbabwe before or not yet?
I have been to Zimbabwe. We as a family lived in Zambia, like I said, where my parents worked. And I took a few trips when I was young. And I haven't been back since I was a teenager because, well, to start with, I was at uni, and when my parents went, I didn't have time, and it was expensive. I talk to people who go home every year, and I'm like, what? Really? We couldn't afford that when I was growing up. No way. Family of 4 going to Zimbabwe and back. We had to save up, really. So, and then, you know, as I've got older, going back, it's difficult because, you know, it's difficult. It's complicated. It's complicated because I know I'm a visible person, and I, you know, it's always weighing up whether help is going to hinder or is it actually really going to, you know, help. So a huge amount of my help is invisible. You know, it's the work that I do that isn't. I don't make a great big song and dance about it because it's not about me. It's about the people I'm, you know, people I'm helping so that they can help themselves and others. You know, and I don't. It's not for my self glorification at all. That's absurd.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am desperate to go. Desperate, particularly my husband. I really want him to experience, you know, I want him to experience Africa. I want, well, Zimbabwe. We've been to South Africa, but I want him to feel that. I want him to feel life. And I just think that I just feel like it opens you up, you know? And I want that gift for my husband. I want that gift for my children. You know, they deserve it. I want to see baobab trees again. You know,
That's what I was actually going. That's what I was going to ask you. That do you have any positives about the Zimbabwe you know, and also does your mom miss Zimbabwe?
Yes, well, she goes a lot. She goes much more because she had her sisters. She no longer has siblings anymore. Her last sister passed away. She has a couple of siblings from but sort of her father had another relationship based around custom because the mother had died. You know how that goes. So they're her half brothers. So they're still around, I think. Well, I know they are. And I think of Chinayi Caves, which I'll never forget as long as I live. I remember being there at 17 and just Zimbabwe ruins, the baboons. I remember music. I remember being out and music and live music and dancing and sadza and, you know, greens with peanut butter, stuff I eat at home.
Can you cook sadza?
You know, my mum is so sweet. She doesn't want me to because she doesn't want me to get burnt. Because every woman has got the big old bubbles slap on the skin. I know how to do it. I do, yeah. But mum always does it. My mum lives up the road from me, so she'll literally just before I left to come, I'm not at home at the moment, and that's how we do it. I'm going away, so she comes with full sadza, relish, greens. I did the greens and peanut butter, and we all sit together and eat from the center. Yeah, it's magical. And of course, you know, I've got this view of Zimbabwe because it's romanticized massively. But what's wrong with that? What's wrong with what, you know, in not that long, in 20 years, I know it's very different to when I was 17 and back there, 30 years. It's very different.
I know exactly what you mean because for me, and we talked about this earlier on, when I went back to Zimbabwe in 2018 after a long period, it just felt so good because I had missed the fresh air, the smell of the dust, you know, when it's rained, just being with loved ones, and, you know, the mawuyus that you're talking about, the baobabs, and, you know, all those things. So a lot of Zimbabweans in the diaspora can relate in terms of what you're talking about. So thank you very much for this, Thandiwe. It has been great talking to you. I didn't think I was going to get an interview with you, and I didn't think you were going to respond straight away, and you did. So I really appreciate this, and actually for being the first guest on Hot Seat, this new look Hot Seat. So thank you so much.
Oh, there we go. I appreciate everything that you've done. And I was so excited to be able to participate. The fact that you have managed to create a voice that is, no matter where you are, you still manage to speak to and for Zimbabweans in Zimbabwe. And I can't thank you enough. And I also, it's so lovely to be able to delight in Zimbabwe with you, you know, and it's something in it that's never going to stop. There's so much love and concern, and it's worth it. It's home.
It is. It is. Thank you all for joining us on the new revamped Hot Seat with me, Violet Gonda. We will have more shows like this, so let us know who you would like to see on the show and the issues you want tackled. All programs are archived on the website violetgonda.co.uk, and you can also follow Violet Gonda on Twitter and YouTube. Good day. You've been watching The Hot Seat with Violet Gonda. For more programs like these, follow @Violet Gonda on Twitter and YouTube, or visit www.violetgonda.co.uk.